The following content is not intended as a substitute for professional legal advice, medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your attorney, advocate, physician, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding any medical or educational concerns.
Hi, and welcome to Empower Dyslexia. I am Stephen Yearout. And here on the show, we're here to make sure that you're a better informed parent in education, and so that you can help advocate for your child properly. On this show, we discuss dyslexia and other related disorders. We speak to researchers, interventionists. We speak about special education policy. We also interview experts in the field and people with life experiences. And really that today is what this show is about the life experience. Be sure to like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. That greatly helps with our sponsors. Speaking of sponsors, Ziggy. Do you know, or did I tell you that we have a new sponsor?
Yes, we do. Today's show is sponsored by Learning Ally, and not just today's show. They are the proud presenters of Empower Dyslexia moving forward, and we are very lucky to have them with us. Can you tell us a little bit about what they do, Stephen?
Absolutely. I am so excited and honored to be partnering with Learning Ally. Learning Ally provides audiobooks for students that struggle with reading and learning. And the great thing about these audiobooks, Ziggy, is that all of them are human read. So there's no computerized voice to it. The kids really enjoy them. My own kids use them for their homework. So it's an amazing, amazing tool. And there's actually a way that you can volunteer. If you like to read and you want to give back, you can actually volunteer to be a reader for some of these books. And we'll put some of that information in the description of this show if you want to do that. So again, as always, if you're watching this, obviously you're on Facebook Live or YouTube Live, and you can get our audio podcast on all of our great apps: iHeartMusic, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, all of these great apps. You can set it to download, and it will download every time that there's a new episode loaded. So make sure that you subscribe and like us there. So today's topic, while I want to set the scene that there's a lot of families that are searching for right answers and just want to get their child help. And in my own case, in my own life, our family and growing up in school was very traumatic. I describe our family life as an active war zone from about the time that I could walk till the time I left school or left home. So our special guest today is my mother.
Hi, Stephen.
So the great thing about Empower Dyslexia is I finally got you on here. This is the reason why Empower Dyslexia really came about, because I wanted to interview you about raising a child with dyslexia and the struggles that were behind it, and how much it took out of you and took out of our family. So today's title for this show is Dyslexia Stole My Life. And I know that that's probably going to be very controversial for some people, but I hope that you stay with me and listen to this entire show. There's a lot of families that are in the middle of this struggle, and they don't believe that there's, a light at the end of the tunnel. And I really hope that you stay with us. So, preparing for this, I'm actually more nervous about this show than any of the other shows that we've done. And preparing for it was very hard. I mean, it brought back a ton of memories that, I thought I suppressed or whatever. And I know that was the same thing for you from talking to you about it. I was talking to somebody not long ago, and they were talking to me about doing their thesis, and they were interviewing dyslexics. And they expected, or she said, I expected to see old scars, old wounds. But when she got into the interviews, what she found was very fresh, very open wounds that were as fresh today as they were when they first started. And really looking at my own life, I would have to completely agree with that.
Right.
I mean, when it's amazing to me that whenever I go speak, I'll have grown men come to me and tell me, you were telling my life story, in tears, and that they've hid this for so long. And I hope that our story and our empowerment will allow these people to finally get the help that they need and they deserve, so they can let this piece go.
Yeah.
So, welcome, Mom.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Are you a little nervous?
Very nervous. I'm generally not a speaker at all. In fact, I'd rather sit back and listen to you talk. But you convinced me to come and tell my side of the story. Like you said, it's one of those things that you put behind you, and you think, we've dealt with that, and things are all over, and we're going to forward with our life. And then when you had your sons, then you got involved in the school system and dyslexia, and it started bringing back all those memories. And then when you asked me to be on the show, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't deal with that. And we started going over, our life and how traumatic and how toxic it was at times. And it was just more than I could deal with. But you explained to me, Mom, you need to go on that program and tell our side of the story, so it will help others, that others are dealing with this and they're hurting. And you just can't imagine what life is like when you're dealing with something like this. You want to hide it. You don't want to tell anybody about it. You just want to deal with it in secret and hope no one realizes what's going on in your home. I know it was extremely difficult for you. It was hard on me. And when you started telling me or explaining to me how you were feeling, and I explained to you my side of it, then we realized, hey, wouldn't it have been nice if we'd have had somebody to, like Dr. Conway or somebody that would have been able to help us during that period of time, to get through that time, that stressful period. But here we are, and somehow we have gone on with our lives, and we're still dealing with it because you're having to deal with it with your sons. But yes, I think dyslexia did steal part of my life, because part of it I've just blotted out. I didn't want to remember. And I know for you it has too.
So
But here we are, and maybe we can tell our story and help somebody.
I'm very, very proud of you for facing your fear and doing this. I know that it was very hard.
Extremely hard.
So let's start with, can you tell us a little bit about you, who you are, a little bit about your family?
Well, I was raised in a little town in East Texas, and I came from a big family. There was 8 children, and we were the normal family, I suppose. I had a brother that was a year younger to the month than I was.
So that's you and Tommy in the middle?
Yes, that's us in the middle. And we kind of palled around, together in our younger years. And we were just good pals. But
Yeah, we're only 12 months apart, right?
12 months to the year. And we ended up, because of circumstances, even though I was a year old. Yeah, that's him. He was riding a horse. He loved, his horse, and he loved to ride horses, and I did too. In fact, in our younger years, we did ride horses a lot. We always had horses and cows on the farm. And my parents were very good people, hardworking people, just like, most people out there are. And we believed in God and our country and our family. My parents, my dad he loved to farm. That was his thing. He loved to farm. My mom was a housewife until she turned 50 years old, and then she went to school and became a nurse. But that was after all the kids were gone. I'm the wife of Jerry Yearout, and I have 2 children, Stephen and his sister Melissa. I have 6 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren, and 2 on the way. And I never worked in the education department, working with children or anything. But I love children, and I love my grandkids, and I spend as much time with them as I can. And usually they'll come out to our farm. We have a farm in Seagerville, and they'll come out and spend the summer with me when they can. Now they're getting a little older, so they have sports and other things to do, but they still come out as often as they can.
All of them love to come out and spend as much time there. So can you tell us a little bit about how school was for you, and talk us through a little bit of that?
Well, just to give you an idea how long it's been, I started in first grade in 1951. Now, that's been a long time ago. And the word dyslexia, I don't know if there was such a word back then. I'd never heard of it.
You'd be surprised that it's been known about since the late 1800s.
Oh, my gosh. Well, you didn't hear about it in school.
No, but...
Because I did fairly well in school because I had the ability to memorize things. So I would memorize things and make, A's and B's. My brother didn't have that ability, so he struggled in school. And he ended up failing the first grade, and he may have even failed the second grade. And I would try to cover for him and help him, but it got to the point where I couldn't deal with it either. I was just struggling myself. And that's my brother when he was about 6 years old, I think. I think he may have been in the first grade, and I was in the second at that time. But he struggled a lot, and he would get in school, he'd get in trouble at school, and then he'd get in trouble at home, and it just became a vicious cycle of I cringe sometimes when I'd walk in the house because my parents would be getting on to my brother and saying to him, "Why don't you do better? Why don't you care?" And his teachers would say the same things. Tommy's just lazy and he doesn't care about doing anything. But
Well, let's take a break there. And you said that you did fairly well because you memorized
I
a lot.
memorized.
But when we were talking and preparing for the show, you started revealing that you struggled with reading, not necessarily spelling, but reading also, and that because of all of the trouble that your brother was in constantly, you hid
Yeah.
it.
My problems seemed very small compared to his. And he was getting into behavioral problems and all that. So that, just kind of aggravated everything. My little problems I had, I didn't tell anybody. In fact, I just kind of formed a little shell around myself, and I would try to work it out myself. I had difficulty pronouncing words correctly, and I could read, but the words that I couldn't pronounce, I would just skip over them. And I ended up making a habit of doing that even into my adult years. And I really had to work on it after I become an adult to, learn to pronounce words correctly. But and that kind of bled over into my speech as well, because I wasn't pronouncing words correctly, and at times somebody would make a joke or they'd tease me about something I said. I would just clam up and wouldn't say anything. So it got to the point where I was very quiet, and most people would say, "Oh, Sharon is a very shy person," but I really wasn't shy. I just didn't want to mess up and have somebody tease me about it.
Right. So your brother struggled all the way through school, and that bled over into, like you were saying, behavior problems between, you know, him and actually your family, because everybody was involved.
Yeah.
And I'll start with saying that, your mother and father and of course, I know grandparents are always looked at in a different light, but they were the most loving, caring people that
They were.
I think that I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
And they would do anything for you to help you in any way ever.
Yeah.
So that's not to say because Tommy was getting in trouble because your parents were mean.
No. No, my parents did everything they could possibly do. I assume there weren't any resources out there or tools to help them back then to deal with, to them and to everybody else, it looked like it was just strictly a behavioral problem, that he just made wrong choices and went about his life in a careless way, regardless of who it hurt. But he wasn't that way. He was a very caring and a very loving person.
Yeah, he ended up being, at the end of, I always, because we didn't interact with him much growing up, I always saw him as being very gruff and rugged and, not, like you said, not caring.
Yeah.
But once there towards the end of his life, when we were around him more, I got to understand that was not what it was.
No.
It was the facade that he put on to protect himself
Yes.
from seeming like he was dumb.
Yeah.
And it's something.
we all kind of form a shell around ourselves. And he did as well as I did. I guess maybe everybody does when they have a problem that they don't know how to deal with it or they don't know what to do.
But when you go to school and you can't perform in school, and then you come home and you can't perform at home, you don't have any reprieve. You don't have any place to go
Yeah.
to relax and be yourself and
Right.
be, who you really are.
Yeah.
So he ended up quitting school, right?
He did. He dropped out of school, and that just led to one thing after another, wrong choices. He ended up, he found the love of his life, but, things didn't work out there. He had 2 lovely children and ended up in a very nasty divorce. And, but his life just was a roller coaster like that.
Perpetual.
Yes, until he got, a lot older, and then he
But that was at the end
went
of
to
his life.
Vietnam, and that was the end of his life, and Agent Orange and all that, and then got cancer, and he passed away about 5 years ago. But that's what his life, how it stole, dyslexia stole his life. Now, they never diagnosed him as having dyslexia, but I'm sure that's what it was.
I mean, everything that you've told me about him and your sisters have told me about him points to it.
Yeah.
So how were you in school? I mean, I know that you said that you memorized and you basically hid
Yeah.
and flew under the radar
Yeah.
for quite a while, right?
Yes. I used whatever tools I had available and was able to memorize things, and you learn very early on how a teacher teaches and what type of tests they give, so you learn to accommodate, and that's what I did. But that internal struggle that was going on inside of me, I never shared with anybody. In fact, not even my sisters, as close as we were to each other, I never revealed that to them.
Well, it wasn't until the show started that you ever revealed it to me, because I always thought that you did well in school. Because
Yeah.
I mean, you were my dictionary, my spell check when I was in school.
Yeah.
So I had no idea that you struggled in school.
Oh, yeah.
So let's.
But even struggling, I managed to make A's and B's.
Right.
But I didn't feel like I deserved that A or B, because I would memorize things, do my test, and then forget it.
But once you went from a small country school to a bigger school is when it all
Yeah.
came out, right?
Living in East Texas, we knew how to slaughter or butcher the English language, and we got by with it. The teachers would still give me a good grade, even though, maybe I wasn't speaking correctly, or I could write. That I could do. But I had plenty of time to go over and over and edit and edit and edit. And I enjoyed writing because it gave me a chance to really be able to express how I felt and what was going on with me. But when I got to Waxahachie and I spent my junior year there, it was a different story. I really had to struggle and work there because they wouldn't accept, just halfway doing something. And so when I was
the
making
standards
A's in DeKalb, I was making B's there, and I thought, oh my gosh, what's going on? So I had to up it. I had to work a little harder to make an A then.
So I asked you this question before, but when you're young, you you dream or you have an idea of what your perfect family is going to be, how you're going to, you're going to get married and you're going to have 2.5 kids with a white picket fence and, all of this. What was your dream or what was your idea of the perfect family?
Well, my idea was to have a loving, caring family. I mean, because my parents were very religious, and we were involved in church growing up. So that was kind of my whole thing. And I wanted to marry a minister and, have 2 children and work in the church and serve people and help them with their spiritual needs. So as a child and a young girl, that's what I wanted. That was my perfect family. And no problems, no confrontations, and none of the struggles that is the norm for a family.
Right.
I thought, well, the perfect family would be that you didn't have all that.
So you find this strapping young minister and get married to him. No, he's not a minister.
No, I ended up marrying a Catholic boy from Dallas, Texas. But he told me before we got married, he used to want to be a priest. So I guess that was close.
He wanted to, so that was a consolation.
Yeah.
It was good enough.
Yeah.
So you get married. You have my sister, beautiful little girl. And this is when y'all were in Kansas, not long after y'all were married. This was right before, I think this was right before Melissa was born. And we moved forward a little bit. So now you've had, I think there's almost 6 years difference between Melissa and I. So you have some time to really bond to her and get to know her personality and how she's going to be. So I'm sure your thinking and Dad's thinking was much like mine when we had kids. Well, the first one's great, so let's have another one. So now you're pregnant with me. What's your expectations? What's your dream for your kids?
Well,
Because as parents, we think about, okay, I've got this beautiful baby, and I'm going to teach them and love them and make them so successful. And I have all these aspirations of where I want them to be and do and grow and,
well, my main thought, I guess, was that you'd be happy first, and foremost. Be happy, get a good education, later have a good career, live by the golden rules.
Missed the mark on all those.
And
No, I was
I got my wish.
I was for the most part, even with saying how traumatic a lot of the stuff was, I do remember being for the most part, being happy and funny and joking around and playing around, kidding around a lot.
And a lot of that, Melissa was more quiet, like me, but she had a good sense of humor as well. She's very smart. She made good grades in school. You came along. You were a real happy baby, smiling, laughing. Everybody loved you, and yes, you were happy for the most part. You loved to climb, so if we left you for 2 seconds, you would be climbing up on top of the cabinet and getting into something. As you can see, I think that was your birthday or something, and I baked a cake for you, and you got up there and got in it before the rest of us.
It's my cake.
So you love to climb and you love to get into stuff, so you were a little bit more adventurous than Melissa.
Yeah, I was definitely not scared of really anything.
No.
So when did you start seeing? I love that picture. That right there just shows my attitude.
Yeah, it does.
You know, king of the world.
And I can conquer the world. That was your attitude. Melissa was standing there, I don't know.
When did you start seeing that there may be learning difficulties or behavior problems?
Well, actually, now that I can look back on it, when you were 6 months old, you got your days and nights mixed up, and you would want to sleep during the day and stay up all night. That was kind of an indication that, I mean, a lot of babies do that, but with you, it was your life pattern throughout your whole life.
Still today.
Yeah, you still today, you like to sleep during the day and be up all night. But I guess there were little clues along the way, you know, when you started the kindergarten, you did really well. When you were in the first grade,
And we were in Australia at
we
this
were in
point.
yeah, we had left. Jerry had gotten a job with E-Systems at the time, and we had gone over to Australia. And you started when you were 4 years old. You started in kindergarten, and then you did well. You were only going half a day, so, and it was in the afternoons too, I think. So you got to sleep. Well, in the first grade, when you had to get up early, that's when we began to have a problem. And the teachers would call and say, Stephen's got his head on his desk and we can't get him to, you know, wake up and participate in the class. So that kind of went on. And I guess after when you were in the second grade, they kind of just let you sleep if you wanted to sleep.
I don't remember them being very stern. I do remember, you know, having to get sent to the headmaster's office, the principal's office, on a couple occasions.
Yeah.
But, you know, the behavior really started because I was very rambunctious. I was, you know, full of energy, constantly going, constantly getting into something.
Exactly.
Wouldn't go to bed. And I mean, those are normal, typical kid things.
And even when you started in the first grade and you were writing your letters, your D's and Alls would be backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And
It was never.
even then we
Didn't
thought,
well, I mean,
well,
you don't
he'll
catch
grow
it.
out of that, and that's what the teacher said. You know, a lot of kids do that, and they grow out of it, and they just have to learn to adjust.
So Ziggy, real quick, the picture where we're on an airplane. Yeah. So can you bring that up real quick? Mm-hmm. So the kind of the story behind this picture, when we were coming back and forth on turnaround or coming back to Australia, my mom went to the doctor and was like, "Hey, you need to give me something to help this child sleep because he's too much to be in a tin can for 20 hours." And if you can see there, she looks exhausted. My sister's like, "Please save me." And I'm just sleeping away. But my mom said the thing that is
telling
telling
you know.
is the fact that the sun
You
is
can
coming
see
through
the sun. I mean, it's daylight.
I couldn't find this picture until much later, but the second leg of this flight, my mom said that, of course, it was nighttime. The flight attendants would take turns walking me up and down the aisles and taking me to the pilot's cockpit to talk to the pilots because my mom had just had it.
That was after about 4 to 6 hours, you know, been on the flight, and you've been up and down and either crying or laughing or playing or something.
So, I mean, in Australia, you know, I was very active. I raced BMX. I was always outside playing. My dad and I were in the bush all the time. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of signs there because I was always doing something.
Exactly.
But we moved back home in early
1982.
82.
May of 18.
So I had
May of
already
1982.
finished
Third
third
grade.
grade in Australia. Came back. My sister had already finished, I don't know, ninth
Ninth
grade. They tested my sister. They actually moved her up a grade.
Right.
They tested me and told
Wanted
me
you
that
to
that
repeat the third grade.
I was going to be honored to repeat the third
Yeah.
grade again. And that's really where this story starts.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, they did some testing to see where you were, and they told us that you were actually working at a second grade level, and that it would be a disaster for you to go to the fourth grade at that point. So they said he needs to repeat the third grade. So we said, okay. We realized that you'd had some problems, and so we agreed to it. And about halfway through the third grade, you were still having a lot of problems. And in the fourth grade,
well,
actually, they wanted at the end of the third grade, they came back and said, Stephen is still not working at a third grade level, and we want him to repeat the third grade for the third time. And I said, there is absolutely no way that we're going to let him repeat the third grade. And at that point,
well, do you remember getting a phone call from the principal and what he asked you?
I don't remember.
So because and we're trying to gloss over a lot of this really quickly, but I was struggling so much in school that I wouldn't do my classwork. By the time
yeah.
we got home,
That was
my
in the
mom and
fourth
dad
grade,
had
I think.
already received, I don't know how many phone calls that I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. So my mom come in from work and sit me down and say, okay, let's get started. And I would sit at the island or the table, and I would sit there and stare at my paper for
Yeah.
4 or 5 hours.
Actually, that was throughout elementary
yeah.
and middle school, pretty much.
And would never, it would cause so many fights, and it would drive you, to the point that, you were
Well, I would work all
you were
day.
crazy
and,
that you were having to come home
Come
and
home
do that.
to fix supper for everybody, and then trying to get you situated with your homework. And then I'd get a call from the principal's office saying Stephen is not turning in his homework. He's failing. We don't know, what the solution is. And at one point, he suggested that he paddle you. He said maybe Stephen will realize how important it is to do his work at school. And we went ahead and
And he
gave
was
him our
wrong.
permission, because at that time you could do that.
Right.
And
They paddled me every
it got
day.
to the point where Stephen was getting a paddling
Every day.
every day. And the principal called me and he said, Miss Yearout, Stephen is still not doing his homework. Do I have your permission to continue paddling him, or what are we going to do? And I said, no, stop it now. And
they went from that to having me write sentences.
Yeah.
And I remember
instead
one.
of paddling, then you had to start writing sentences.
And then it went to paragraphs, and at one point it was
hundreds of sentences.
it was 250 sentences or paragraphs, and I sat in the cafeteria for a couple of days, one at a time, over and over and over. I wasn't in class, stayed in the cafeteria by myself.
Yeah. See, I didn't remember that part, that you had to sit in the cafeteria. They had the lights off.
Mm-hmm.
And you sat there all day long from morning till
Yep.
4 o'clock in the afternoon, or whatever time you got out of school,
Well, and
writing sentences.
I still have vivid memories of you crying and screaming and doing any and everything that you could possibly do, to try to get me to do my homework. And I remember just sitting there looking at it
Yeah.
until, y'all had been pushed past your point of sanity, and you go get a belt and,
Yeah.
spank me or whatever. But
Well,
I can understand that, because, and it's not to blame y'all, but you had been pushed past your limit. You didn't know what else to do. You were trying to do something.
And generally that was after,
Yeah.
after I came home
4,
from
5,
work
6
and I was
hours.
getting
Yeah.
supper for everybody, and you would sit at the table. This one particular night I remember really well because you started doing your homework, or you were sitting there looking at it, and you were sitting on your foot, and you'd sit there for a while and you'd wobble from side to side, and then you'd fall off the chair, and then you'd get back up and then look at the paper again, and I would come back every 10 or 15 minutes and you still hadn't done a thing on that paper. And at about 10 o'clock at night, I was just crazy by then. And my daughter came over and she said, Mom, let me help him. And she sat down there, and I think she did the homework for you. But that's about the only way you do it, if somebody did it for you.
I remember you were having a really hard time with that one, because you were like that. You bust into tears when you were telling me that was the one time that really stood out in your mind, because you had gone over the edge trying to get me to do my work.
Yeah.
So-
I remember that so well, because her walking up there and being so calm told me, Sharon, you've lost it. You have got to calm down. And I've never forgot that. Every time I think about it, I cry. And now I would never do something like that, scream at my kids or scream at my grandkids. But you get to a point where you're just nuts, I guess. You can't deal with it. You don't know how to deal with it. And I can imagine what you felt like.
I was numb. I was numb all the time. I just didn't know what to do, what to say. And I'm talking about as a child. I felt guilty. I felt worthless, because I didn't know why I couldn't do it. I didn't know why I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And, those behaviors, because y'all were always so mad at me for not doing what I was supposed to be doing, I didn't have a reprieve or a way out, and neither did y'all.
Yeah.
Y'all didn't get to relax or have an enjoyable time with your kids, right? Yeah. I was in summer school every year through middle school, even in high school. And I remember taking one family vacation.
Right.
We never got to do anything because of school.
Right.
So we get into middle school, although middle school was really fun for me because we had a lot of friends, and I played football for the first 6 weeks until the grades came out, and then no pass, no play. I couldn't, participate anymore. But that's when the behaviors really started coming in even more, because you're adding in testosterone, you're adding in the fact that I'm starting to settle into the I don't care. I'm in believing the lie that I'm never going to be better. This is as good as it's going to get. So why am I even trying? Why am I even making an effort? So, that's when, my relationship with Dad really just went downhill quickly. And I would, I know it now, I would purposely pitch you two against each other.
Right.
Because I wanted y'all to leave me alone. I just wanted to sit in my room by myself and listen to my music as loud as I could. And I wanted everybody to leave me alone. I remember it so vividly that I would just leave me alone. Just leave me alone. Get away from me. I don't want your help. But now I understand I was crying out for help. And y'all were trying. Y'all never stopped trying. Because of y'all, I am where I am. I couldn't imagine having parents that didn't help or didn't do what they needed to do or couldn't do what I needed, and how helpless those parents feel along with that child.
Yeah.
You know, y'all took me to Scottish Rite and got, testing done there. I mean, you did including, y'all were going to put me in a dyslexia private school. Everything you could possibly think of, y'all tried, and you were willing to do and sacrifice just to take away that struggle. And I fought it more and more and more and harder because I never had anybody truly explain to me that this will change your life. Taking this rock, this barrier out of your path, taking this away from you and giving you these skills will absolutely change your life and those people directly affected by what's going on with you.
Yeah. I've seen a tremendous difference in you and your whole outlook since you've started dealing with your own children and the school system, and got involved with Dr. Conway, and it just made a lot of difference.
So, middle school was kind of a blur. It was all about, hanging out with my friends and football, and my teachers at that point they all really liked me, and they were just like, please just turn something in so I can pass you.
Yeah. And that's what the teachers would tell me. If Stephen will just try, we'll pass him.
So I get into high school now. Again, playing football, star athlete for the first 6 weeks, and then it's taken away. And, it just...
no pass, no play. That just broke your heart.
I didn't have anything else that school was good for at that point. Mm-hmm. And stuff got so bad at home that we, as a family, decided to send me to a youth ranch.
Right.
And on my 16th birthday, y'all dropped me off in a potato field in Rupert, Idaho. At a youth ranch. And it was really the best thing that could have happened because it removed me from the situation and allowed me to have that time to heal or to not have all of that anxiety and depression and anger constantly on top of me. And it did the same thing for y'all.
Yeah. It got you out of that toxic...
Right. Well, it got all of us out of that toxic relationship that we were in.
And atmosphere. And
after I was there for about 6 months. I did really well in school. Have no idea why or how, but I just don't think that school was very hard there. I get back here and everything was pretty okay for a while until I was just buying time I was old enough to quit school. Right. And it's exactly what I did. It was the worst decision I've ever made in my life. I tell the story about having nightmares, and it was even into my adult. Even in the last 10 years, having nightmares of trying to go back to school and beg my coaches to allow me to get back on the football team and play again and graduate.
Yeah.
And I couldn't talk. The people were there, but I couldn't talk to them. I was screaming, please let me on the football team. Please let me graduate. I want to graduate. I so badly wanted to. I so badly wanted to make y'all proud of me. To be the person that I knew I could be. To be the person that y'all wanted me to be also. And I couldn't do it. and was always a failure to me. I carried that for years
Yeah.
and still carry it to some degree. But when you look at that picture right there, what do you see? Now, knowing what was going on.
Were you a freshman in high
No,
school?
I was, that was a junior.
Junior?
I'm sorry, sophomore.
Sophomore, yeah.
mean, I see a
the
very-
teachers would call and say, Stephen is asleep on his desk. And if he'll just turn in his work, we'll pass him. Your coaches wanted you to pass so you could play football. Everybody loved you and wanted to help you, but at that particular time, I don't think anybody knew how.
It was
They
past,
thought if talking to you would do the trick, they would talk to you and you would sit there for hours listening to someone tell you exactly what you needed to do, but they never showed you how to do it.
when I see that picture, I see a very depressed, sad,
Oh, yeah.
angry, not knowing what's going on or how we're going to make it through it or why I should even care or continue living or anything. I was always straddling that. There's so many kids that commit suicide
Yeah.
because of this.
And living in a home where all of that strife and stuff is going on, you can understand, why they get to that point, because I've heard a lot of people say, why would somebody do that? The only reason they do it is because they're hurting so bad that they don't think there's a way out.
So now that we're on this other side and we're looking back, how has this affected your life?
It stole most of my life. It really did. It stole the time that it would have been the best time when you're raising your children and you're going on vacations as a family and you're enjoying your home. It stole all that from me. And because it was so painful, I somehow was able to block all that out. So I forgot a lot of the good along with the bad. And that's the reason why I think it stole part of my life.
And we didn't even get into
How it affected,
my sister.
daughter
And
and what was going on
yeah.
with her during this time.
Because she was the quiet one. She was
Yes.
left alone.
Yeah.
She didn't get what she needed from y'all because y'all dealt with me 100% of the time.
Exactly. And
so-
there was times she needed, some attention.
We're going to talk about that very soon because that's a topic that we need to discuss. One last question. What do you think about Empowered Dyslexia and what we're doing now?
Oh, I think this is the greatest thing. I wish I'd been here 35 years ago or a program like this. And our life would have been a whole lot different. And I'm sure a lot of other lives would have been different
Well,
had this been available.
at the beginning of the show, I said dyslexia stole my life. However, I'll also say that dyslexia gave me life back
Yeah.
because through dyslexia, I'm able to help people and give them hope and the tools that they need and hopefully give them their life back and let them know that it's okay and we'll make it through it.
Yeah.
Right? So it's full circle. Do I blame dyslexia for all the problems we had? No, but it definitely was a huge factor in it.
Yeah.
So, now with having my 3 kids and 2 of them being dyslexic, looking back on this, we both have lived through this twice. You lived through it in your childhood and then through my childhood, where I lived through it with my childhood and now dealing
Yeah.
with it as a parent.
Actually, it's the third time for me.
Yeah. So, I have to look back and say, how do I make this world a better place when I'm gone? How do I leave that legacy? How do I help these families and kids who are struggling? How do I do that and make sure that they get the help they need? I make it a mission to say no more kids will not get the help they need. No more families will have to deal with this. That's my mission. That's the reason why Empower Dyslexia is here. That's our purpose.
Right.
So, this was a hard show.
It was very hard.
I want to thank you, and I love you, and I love Dad. And like I said, I wouldn't have made it if it wasn't for y'all. I want to, it's not Valentine's yet, but I want to give you this.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. I love you too. And I'm so glad you have this program and Dr. Conway, and you have been a joy as a child. Even though those bad things happened, I still wouldn't change it, because then that would have changed who you are. And I mean, we talked about the bad parts. There was a lot of good parts
Right.
too. I mean, you were fun to be with. You were the clown, and had a lot of friends, and we just loved you dearly. Still, I mean, we love you dearly.
Well, let's see if I can get through these events, Ziggy. That show was a lot harder than what I thought it was going to be. Wow. This Saturday, February 15th, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Naaman Forest High School, Garland ISD is going to host their second annual Dyslexia Symposium. Make sure that you stop by the Empower Dyslexia booth and say hi. We're going to be one of the vendors there, so I would love to speak to you and hear your stories and how Empower Dyslexia can help, or how dyslexia has affected your life, and if there's anything that we can do to support you. That's about all the time that we have, and I don't know how we wrap this show up in an hour when I fully expected it to go to a second show. But thank you for powering through this with me, Mom. I love you, and I love my dad. I love you, Dad, and thank you for all the support that you've given me and shown me and my family and our boys. So,
Well, thank you, Stephen. We love you. You're a wonderful son.
please be sure to like us and subscribe on Facebook. Sorry, please be sure to like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Leave us comments. We love to hear from you, and always remember that you can hear the audio version of Empower Dyslexia on all of our favorite audio apps, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Stitcher, iTunes, all of the normal programs that are out there. Sorry, I'm a little speechless right now. I'm trying to get on my mind back. As always, we like to remind you that if your child is struggling, don't wait to get them tested. You can go to our website, www.empowerdyslexia.info, download one of these templates to get the process started, turn it into your school. You will be happy to find out what's going on, and so will your child when you start getting the help. Thank you all for the support, and I really hope that these shows help you and your family. But until next time, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.